Okay, I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the other side of liability, which is government regulation, specifically about consumer products. I'm not going to look at this from the point of view of what the regulatory industry is very concerned about right now, which is consumers actually having these 3D printers in their homes and making products and putting them out on the market, or even just using them in their homes, because I'm really just going to focus on what's going to concern you as a manufacturing community. Really, 3D printing doesn't really change the scope of the regulated industry here, but it does present some new challenges simply because it is so much easier to make a new product line, or even the same product out of a new material. And so steps kind of get skipped in the process. So where I really want to start here is kind of by defining our universe, because you may make donuts, food, you may make industrial products, or deal only with industrial manufacturers. But so what is really a consumer product? What is the regulated universe that I'm going to be talking about today? A consumer product is an article, but also a component of an article, so parts, for sale, which is usually what we think about, okay, you know, something that you buy at Target or Walmart or on Amazon, or for personal use, and that's a big one, consumption or enjoyment of a consumer in a household, school, recreation, or this big category of otherwise, which trips us up a lot. So I want to point that out because you need to know from the get-go where your product is going down the distribution line if you're the manufacturer, because you may be making things that you intend to go into an office place, but maybe they're being sold to schools, and that brings it into the consumer product category. You may also be making something that you're not putting up for sale, but it's a consumer product nonetheless. That's a consumer product. So in general, if you're not really in this industry already, you need to know how are consumer products regulated. Federal and state agencies are what we're talking about here. There are some big acts like the Consumer Product Safety Act, the Federal Hazardous Substances Act, that's regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, or CPSC, and their regulations are what I'm really going to be focused on today. But you need to know that state agencies are also taking this very seriously and passing a lot of even more stringent regulations at the state level, California in particular. Those agencies and the laws that they are administering are going to have some regulations that are specific to certain products, like ATVs, for example, has its own regulatory scheme, but also big baskets of products. So children's products, for instance, are much more highly regulated than just a product that would be meant for an adult. Also, even if your product isn't specifically regulated as a consumer product, if it's unreasonably dangerous, either because it has a defect or because it's designed to be unreasonably dangerous, those buckyballs, I don't know if you've heard of those little magnetic balls have now been completely banned because it's an unreasonably dangerous product. It serves no good purpose, like a kitchen knife, but yet children were swallowing it and having their intestines ripped open. So if you make a product that doesn't comply and put it out on the market, or if you have an unreasonably dangerous product and fail to report and recall it in time, you're going to be met with civil and criminal penalties. And the CPSC actually a couple weeks ago at a conference I was at actually indicated that they are now going to be increasing those penalties to try to go along with what they think Congress wants them to do. So why does 3D printing change things? I would argue it really doesn't. We run into these issues a lot with new technology, but it does make things a lot easier to produce new products. So for consumers, again, now they can easily manufacture just about anything in their homes if they have a 3D printer. That creates a whole other basket of issues that you as manufacturing community would not have to worry about. If you're already a consumer product manufacturer, now you can very quickly change into new product lines, and you're probably using a different material than what you're accustomed to make the same products, which opens up some additional liability, as Mike was actually talking about too. And then if you're an industrial manufacturer, now you may be crossing that line into consumer products without knowing it, because again, that easy transition from one product to another. We're going to start there. We're going to start with industrial manufacturers. And what I'm saying when I mean industrial manufacturers are, you don't make consumer products, you don't think that you make parts that go to consumer products, and so you're not really generally aware of regulations in the consumer product world. So how do you know when you've crossed the line? Again, this is where your distribution chain and understanding the marketing of your product comes in handy. Are your products that are really supposed to be only for industry now being sold on Amazon? I've seen that, you know, where, well, we only make this for, you know, to be used in these types of employment situations. Well, you know, I just pulled it up on Amazon. So now you're a consumer product because you're marketing direct to consumers. Promotional items. This is a promotional item. This is not something that most people think is regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, but just because you don't attach a sale price to it, if it's going to a consumer and maybe used in their home or in a school, the Consumer Product Safety Commission is going to have a really hard time saying, no, this is not this is not regulated by us. So I'll say right now, please don't give this to your kids, and you'll see why later. And then parts. If you manufacture a part for an industrial tractor, for instance, and now you say, well, I can 3D print it in this size, why not make it in this size and, you know, sell it for use in a home lawnmower? Well, now you've moved into the consumer product safety realm, I guess. So if you do end up crossing that line, you need to be aware that there are testing, certification, labeling requirements for certain products, particularly children's products. There may be specific standards that apply to a particular product. And then if your product, again, is unreasonably dangerous or creates a substantial product hazard, which is, you know, creating an unreasonable risk of injury or death, then you are going to have reporting and recall obligations from CPSC's point of view. You're going to have to tell the agency that, oops, we've got this product out there, it's you know, not compliant, or it's creating an unreasonable risk of injury, and they're going to tell you, well, you need to recall that product, or no, you know, it's good for right now, but you just need to make these changes going forward. If you are already a consumer product manufacturer, you're also going to run into problems where you start to manufacture new types of product lines. And this happens a lot. I usually will consult with a client on the front end if they're used to this sort of issue. They might call me and say, you know, we make X product and now we want to start marketing it differently, or we want to make a different version of it that we're going to market to families. And as soon as they say families or children, I start to get a little bit nervous, because, for instance, children's products, if you move from adults-only products into children's products, you're going to run into a whole lot of regulations and steps that you have to take before you even put that product on the market. Children's products need to be tested for lead and phthalates. That includes testing from a third-party testing lab that's been certified by the CPSC. They need to be tested for flammability. They need to meet small part regulations. They can't be really small so that a child will swallow it. And then, you know, they need to be certified that they've gone through that testing and comply with those regulations. They need to be labeled in particular ways. They need to have tracking labels on them. It's very extensive. You also need to worry about whether you're actually manufacturing a banned product. I don't think buckyballs is really an issue right now because of what it's made out of, but suppose you say, well, you know, this is really great idea. You know, I haven't seen lawn darts in a while. You know, we should get back into the lawn darts industry because I have great memories of, you know, family picnics. Well, lawn darts are banned. So, you know, so you might stumble into a banned product category. You also may say, well, you know, this is great, but I need this to be glossier, and this product and this material doesn't let it be as glossy as I need it to be. So I'm going to put a varnish on this. Well, the varnish is regulated by lead paint standards, so you need to be testing that for compliance with the lead paint standards. If you put an electrical component into any product, you're going to run into a whole lot of issues right there. Actually, I can tell you that I think maybe 6 or 7 different agencies have a piece of electrical products. So not only are you running into new regulations and new hazards, you're also going to run into new agencies regulating your product. And then the big concern, of course, with 3D printing when I hear about it is plastic. Plastic is regulated by CPSC only kind of in small measure, mostly through children's products, but through other agencies as well. FDA regulates the use of plastic in packaging for food products because, for instance, BPA is one of those substances that it comes in contact with your water when it's in the water bottle, and it sort of seeps into the water, and that contaminates it, becomes a food additive, and now the FDA is entitled to regulate that. So actually you see a lot more BPA regulation through the FDA than through the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Also, if you're a consumer product manufacturer, you're going to start to run into issues where now you're making the same product but with a new material. Mike touched on this, so I'm just going to sort of gloss over it. But again, you know, if you're now making the same part for a product but out of a new material, you need to make sure that there's no latent weaknesses in that product. You might need to completely retest it, even if it's only for an adult product. You may need to test it for strength, because if it is going to make that product break more easily, then that's going to create possibly a substantial product hazard and going to subject you to regulatory liability. If it's a children's product and you're making it out of a new material, you're going to need to go through a whole other analysis of whether this product is now no longer compliant with the children's standards. The plastic, of course, might not meet certain regulatory standards from the FDA standpoint, again, or from state regulation. And other ingredients and chemicals that might be in the plastic may be regulated under the Federal Hazardous Substances Act, which is also administered by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. So what's the takeaway point in this is, you really, just because you have the technology to change from one product line to the other very quickly, thou shalt not dabble. And as Boromir tells us, especially not in children's products, you really need to start from the same position that you would if you were going to make a new product line in a less easy way. You need to start with the analysis of, you know, is this new product substantially different than what I'm making? If so, should I check with my legal counsel to make sure that this is not regulated in some other field? You know, also, of course, Mike touched on this too, educate yourself on the properties of the material you're using, because that's going to come into play not only when you, you know, are required to test it as you are for children's products, but also, you know, you need to know what's in your product and whether it's going to create a substantial product hazard down the road. So that's, again, a very, very general overview. I'm happy to answer more questions about it later. But again, be wary when you're entering into new space that you might be regulated and not know about it. I also want to talk about very briefly FDA regulation in this field. It's something that's kind of come up in fits and spurts throughout this presentation, but I think it's less likely that you are a manufacturer who's manufacturing one type of product and you're going to accidentally break into an FDA regulated space. One of the exceptions to that would be food packaging. If you are already making packaging for something else, just know that if you enter into packaging for food, the FDA does regulate that fairly heavily, especially with the BPA additives and that sort of thing. But I do want to touch on it briefly so you understand the parameters. Thankfully, we had breakfast already, so this isn't a problematic slide for us. But again, we've talked about it sort of at length through this presentation about how we can now 3D print food. It's sort of a fascinating topic. Apparently, we're looking into ways of printing sustainable food, food that actually grows, after you purchase it. It's really a fascinating industry. But again, it's unlikely that you're going to have a machine that prints plastic pieces like this, and you're now going to be able to print pancakes with it. You're going to need a new machine for that. Hershey's, of course, is leading the way in this field. They're all over the 3D printing of chocolate. But if you do decide that this would be a great addition to your manufacturing business, maybe as making promotional chocolate pieces to go along with things, just know that again you're entering another completely regulated industry where you're going to be subject to FDA regulations on packaging, labeling, record keeping, good manufacturing practices, facility registration, all sorts of different areas of regulation. The other part of the FDA, the drug part of FDA, regulates medical products. And this is, again, another really exciting area of 3D printing. You're seeing a prosthetic leg here. We've seen the cast in the previous slides. And then one of the more interesting areas that 3D printing is getting into is what's known as bioprinting, where you're actually using biological matter and cells to grow things like ears, I think is one of the things that I saw. Again, not an area that you're likely to just stumble into, but if you do stumble into it, or if you make the decision that you are going to enter into this market, you need to know that the FDA heavily regulates this area, but they are still trying to figure out exactly how they are going to further regulate this area. So already, if you're making a medical product, you're going to need pre-market approval. There's other regulations that are going to already apply to you just by virtue of the fact that you're making a medical product. But the FDA is probably going to, in the next couple of years, come out with some even more stringent regulations and probably some rulings that is going to make it clear that places like hospitals can now be treated as manufacturers because they're making a certain volume of prosthetics or pieces of skulls or ears. So again, know that this is a really tricky area to get into, and you want to go through the same calculation, if not a further calculation, if you're getting into this new product area.